you so much for joining us today for Legal Insights for the Next Generation, a webinar for law students, new lawyers, and law clerks. Our panel have a lot of interesting topics to cover today. So I'll let you know what we have on the agenda, and I'll get into some introductions of our panel soon. But what you can expect to learn over the next hour, the subjects that they'll be covering are imposter syndrome and being uncomfortable, decorum, rules of professional conduct, mentors, taking control of your career and maternity leaves, client and colleague complaints. They'll also be discussing LSO and LawPro, the black hole balance with greater power giving back, and also be providing tips and tricks. And as always, we'll also have questions throughout the webinar. So the panelists will do their best to answer throughout, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A segment at the end of the presentation. So I know we've received a lot of questions already, so thank you so much to our audience members who have sent in questions. And we'll also be doing polls throughout the presentation. First of all, we just want to find out who's in our audience today and get to know you all a bit more. So
look at all this. You got lawyer, another lawyer, family clerk, another clerk.
just want to make sure to cover it all, you know?
You need a law degree just to answer this poll question.
10 plus. Student, wow, that's quite the. It's like we're in a restaurant selecting a menu.
I promise here. There'll be less for the other questions. They'll be more simple. Just starting off with the big one, you know.
Russ, I feel old having to answer this question.
Well, yeah. What happens after 10 years?
I don't know.
Away? Like.
Well, with the subject matter of today's presentation, I imagine it's a lot of newer lawyers.
True. Mind you, there's some lawyers who do the same thing for 25 years and never change, right? So they've just been doing, but we'll see.
Well, if I left you out on the poll, there is a section for others. So I do want to hear from all of you if you have other experience that you want to share there. Just want to get into our introductions with our panel today. So first off, we have Courtney Derick. Courtney has over 2 decades of experience in family law across the Greater Toronto Area and is dedicated to guiding clients with empathy and professionalism. Graduating with high honors from Seneca College's Law Clerk program, she garnered recognition for academic excellence and supported future legal professionals through field placements for the better part of 10 years. Beyond her legal career, Courtney finds joy in martial arts, travel, and the company of her feline companions. You're the one cat person on our team, I think, Courtney. Most of us are dog people.
Yeah, I am the crazy cat lady.
I'm now a cat person.
But she's got a cat for each of us, right?
I do, yes.
I'm an adjacent cat person. I love dogs, but I also love cats. So I'm with you, Courtney. I'm also on Team Cat.
So thanks so much for being on the panel, Courtney, today and sharing your insights with our audience. Next, we have Stephanie Brooks, who is an associate lawyer at our firm. Stephanie was called to the bar in 2022. She completed her undergraduate degree at Queen's University and obtained her law degree from the University of Liverpool in 2020, graduating with first-class honors. Stephanie has been with the firm since 2018 and is committed to assisting clients through what is a traditionally difficult time by approaching matters with empathy, integrity, and compassion. Next, we have Michelle Mulchan, who is the senior managing lawyer at Russell Alexander Collaborative Family Lawyers. She's been practicing family law for over 14 years, specializing in divorce, custody access, property division, child and spousal support, and family responsibility office enforcement matters. Her focus is on creating comprehensive, creative resolutions to family law matters, and Michelle excels at helping clients deal with complex financial issues that arise as a result of a separation. And last but not least, if you haven't met Russell before, Russell is the founder and senior partner at our firm. With over 25 years of experience, he uses his knowledge and expertise to serve his clients in all aspects of family law and supports them through the transition of divorce and separation. Russell has written 4 books on separation and divorce and is a fully trained collaborative practice lawyer. He speaks at conferences on collaborative practice, marketing, technology, and the law. So on that note, I will pass things over to you, Russ, to get started with the presentation.
Don't run away too quick. Let's find out who our audience is. 32% family lawyer, 12% other lawyer, clerks about 18%, new calls to 1 or 2 less experience. Well, you guys are in the right place. Let's run our next poll. What do you think, Shannon?
Yes, it's
Back to
time.
back. So legal insights for the next generation. Have you experienced imposter syndrome? Yes, no. I'm currently experiencing it. There's probably 4 of us on the screen right now currently experiencing it. But let's do rapid fire real quick. AI in legal profession. Steph, what do you think? Starting off, do you start using it, or do you get your feet wet and then bring the AI in?
Yeah, I'm more of a get my feet wet first,
Yeah.
especially being a new call, just so I build those skills that kind of work that muscle first. But it's crazy what AI can do. I mean, you've written a book about it, Russ. It's wild how helpful it can be.
Courtney, thoughts?
Oh, I don't know. I'm an oldie. You can't really teach an old dog new tricks. I'm a little hesitant, but it's actually it saved me time with hyperlinking, bookmarking, and all of that jazz. So interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, Michelle?
I definitely think that there's a place and there's a time for it. I worry that younger lawyers will, unlike Steph, start with that first. I definitely think having a good understanding first before you use AI is a really good idea.
Yeah, that's a great point. You want the skill set to know if the result AI is giving you is correct or incorrect. If you can't discern that, you might end up in the press with a story that's not exactly glowing. All right, so let's talk about imposter syndrome. Let's see our poll results here. All right, yes, 42%, no, 35%, currently experiencing it, 23%. Well, I'm part of the 23%. So 23 and 42, that's 65 if my math is right. So this is pretty common. What do you think, Steph?
Yeah, absolutely. I know from my experience, I've been practicing now for over a year. So that first year was hard. You know, I was fortunate to be with the firm since 2018. I just hit my 6-year anniversary, but there's something different about carrying your own files and that responsibility being solely upon your shoulders. I was petrified. I was calling, you know, Michelle, Russ, all of the other senior associates at our firm, the law clerks, leaning on as many people as I possibly could, triple, quadruple checking my work. Especially when you work so hard and for so long to be where you are. You know, you've gone through so many years of schooling, all of the exams, the studies, but being thrown into practice, that's where I really learned the most. And I can remember my first court appearance. Fortunately, it was on Zoom, so I could hide my like sweaty, shaking hands. But I had to just constantly remind myself that opposing counsel was a first year, you know, call at one point. The judge that year before was a first year call at one point. So as long as you're carrying yourself with integrity, you're doing justice to the profession, you're being respectful, more often than not, your colleagues, counsel on the other side, they're going to recognize that you're junior and hopefully not take advantage of that. But, you know, we'll talk about it more, mentorship and the importance of it. But imposter syndrome is real. If you're going through it, you're not alone. I think, like Russ mentioned, all of us on the screen have probably faced it or are currently facing it. So
Yeah, and you know, law students went through it too, right?
for
We're
sure.
not prepped for the law exam. We're going to be late. We didn't study enough. So how do you deal with being uncomfortable? Do you just power through it, or what are your tips?
Yeah, at first I'm a very safe person. If you know me, you know I like to think things through. I'm you know, I don't like to take massive risks unless they're warranted, or at least I didn't. I used to be that way. You know, I told Russ, I told Michelle the first year, I was like, I only want to do you know, negotiations. I don't want to go to court.
I only want to work with nice people.
I only
right?
want to, right? I don't want strong personalities, or, you know, I want the nice and easy ones to guide me into the profession. But with the much appreciated push, not a shove, just a gentle push, I took the leap into litigation, and that was the best way to build my skills, my confidence. I thought I was too young. I would be taken advantage of, or people wouldn't take me seriously. But year 2 of my practice, I've won motions. I'm on Canley now. So, I have some high conflict cases that are, in the weeds of court, but that's where I'm learning that I actually thrive. So I completely underestimated myself. And that's something, if I could tell, last year me, is to maybe take that step sooner. But I'm happy I had the firm and, so many great mentors to make sure that I didn't feel like I was drowning as I was, navigating my first year of call.
And if you didn't push yourself, you'd still be doing the safe stuff. So you
Absolutely.
wouldn't realize this other side of you, right?
Exactly.
Michelle, how do you deal with this imposter syndrome, not feeling you're good enough or you're going to succeed?
I think it's really great to have the team. And if you don't have a big team, to have friends, people who are in the industry. It may not, maybe it's not the same area of law as you, but to be able to bounce ideas off one another, to be able to even just complain sometimes. I had a session with one of my directs the other day, and they just spent the entire time complaining about one of their files. And sometimes that's all you need, just someone to listen while you orally go through your argument to just make sure it makes sense to you.
Yeah. Courtney, do law clerks ever get this imposter syndrome? You guys are perfect, right? You know everything.
You know what? Even after 20 years, sometimes I still get it. You're faced with something that you haven't encountered before, and you think, oh gosh, the bag is now with me. What do I do with this? I don't know. For me, I'm a bit of a nerd, so I do a lot of case law research. I inform myself. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to find it. And I find that's a really good way to build your confidence, because then you've got some sort of a background. And, again, like Michelle said, have friends, call them, bother whomever you need to bother. Two heads are often better than one.
Yeah. And I find preparation's usually key, right? If I'm a little anxious or a little nervous, that may be my body telling me I haven't prepared enough, or, I might go through the factum again, take another look at the case law. 9 out of 10 times is always fine, but you don't want to be in court or in a meeting where you're unprepared, you don't have the answer, or you do something embarrassing, or you forget your robes. Lawyers are always concerned about not doing the best for the client and their reputation. So this is a real problem, but it's your body oftentimes telling you to get ready. So let's go to the next poll. Legal insights. Have you noticed a change in decorum since the pandemic? So this is really interesting. When you would appear in court, it would be very obvious when somebody was being uncivil or impolite or not respecting the process of the court. They would usually stand out like a sore thumb. That is a little different in the Zoom world, where some people would say professionalism and civility has gotten a little bit looser, but let's see what our audience thinks. And let's take a look at the results. Yes, it's decreased 60%, improved 5%. That's interesting. Depends. And no, I haven't noticed any change, 14%.
You're the
Courtney,
lucky few, that 14%.
Sorry?
I said that 14% is the lucky few. They've seen no change.
Yeah, or maybe they're corporate lawyers. Who knows? I don't know. They probably have similar issues. But Courtney, what do we need to know about decorum?
I think
guess what are we talking about, first of all, when we say decorum?
Being respectful and being kind. I think above all else, whenever you're in doubt, be kind. Other lawyers, judges, court staff, they all have very long memories. So if you're not at your finest moment, and this is a pattern, chances are they'll remember. You know, we work in a very small, incestuous community, and we will run into each other over and over again. And whether we care to admit it or not, you know, your conduct on other files will inevitably carry over on how other lawyers deal with you, how judges deal with you, that sort of thing. And I mean, in court, I can't really speak to it because I don't hang out there, but, you know, I mean, it brings the process of the court into disrepute if you're not kind and above board.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's easy to, I know Steph's going to talk about this. You think I'm advocate, especially junior lawyers, you think, oh, I'm being a strong advocate, warrior, but you're not understanding if you're in plight, or I'll let Steph speak to it. You know, for that one client, you're burning this relationship with this lawyer that you're going to work with for the next 25 or 30 years. And they're going to remember, you know, they're going to say, oh, that lawyer's sharp, or I'm putting them in my black book. I'm not going to trust that they're going to live by their word. So it'd be quite damaging. But what do you think, Steph?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something, you know, all lawyers, even new calls, experienced lawyers, will likely navigate at some point or another, when you're faced with counsel on the other side that, you know, is maybe, I don't want to say a mouthpiece, but it is really taking on the emotion of their client rather than taking an objective point of view. And that can be really, really difficult to move matters forward. I understand, and we all practice advocacy and being an effective advocate, but sometimes that might be taking a step back and having a frank discussion with your client about reasonable expectations. You know, what is the law and how the facts align with the law. So that's sort of my experience. And like Courtney says, you know, it's very, very difficult to change a first impression. And lawyers talk, we network, we socialize. So you want to make sure that even if you have a tough case or a high conflict case, it doesn't need to seep into the way that you carry yourself as a lawyer, as counsel. And you can still have a good relationship with opposing counsel. There's lots of files where you know, we've worked with the same lawyers multiple times. We've worked with them in collaborative settings. So, you know, we know and we learn and we adapt in order, you know, depending on the file. But it's definitely important to keep that in mind and just ensure that you are being respectful to the profession as a whole, right? You have that responsibility too.
Clients don't understand that, right? They'll see me laughing or asking the other lawyer about their kids or how they're doing. And that's not their impression, right? They don't want me being nicey nice or collegial with the other person. That's not the Hollywood image. But you genuinely get to know these lawyers, right? And when I experience or witnessed, you know, a lack of decorum or incivility, it's usually because the lawyer's inexperienced, they're unprepared, or they don't know what they're doing, right? And this is sort of a front that they put up to kind of cloud that. There's a notice that came out in the Central East region. I think it was Justice McLeod that issued it, reminding the bar of our duty to act properly in court and be civil, and that the court was noticing a lack of decorum in that region. And I was actually before him in person and asked, you know, what's going on? And he's saying we're having Zoom calls and counsel are talking over each other. And he's had to put some counsel in a waiting room, and he's even had to warn counsel of their professional obligation to be respectful to the court. So this is a Superior Court judge telling an officer of the court, you know, you can get a complaint filed against you by the court because of your conduct, which is not going to go well with the Law Society. Do you want to get in on this discussion, Michelle?
Absolutely. I think it would be very difficult for you to explain yourself to a client if you were put in a timeout by a judge, which is
Yeah.
essentially what that is, And the other thing, kind of going back to your point, Stephanie, having those hard conversations with clients is good practice management. You never want your client to hear that they're wrong for the first time from a judge. It's going to hurt your reputation. It's going to hurt your ability to assist that client. And in the end, you're just wasting their time and funds if you are progressing with an argument that is not legally sound or that a judge would never agree to. I've had experienced counsel, go in court and argue that their client should not pay child support. And you could just see, the judge's reaction by that. And you can see that this is going to affect their case and probably the outlook that judge has on that particular lawyer for putting such an absurd position forward.
Yeah, the lawyer never told him. I was before Justice Rozelle, pre-pandemic, and he was sitting in Oshawa, a great bar in Oshawa. Out-of-town lawyer comes in. Pleadings were terrible, including a lot of, verbose, salacious information, which was not helpful or didn't move the file forward. And then the conduct was terrible. So even before the case started, and the takeaway here is don't pick a fight with the judge. They gossip. But Justice Rozelle told counsel, I don't appreciate your pleadings. This isn't the tone and manner in which we litigate matters in this region. And then the lawyer didn't get the cue and was embarrassed in front of her client and started chirping the judge and disagreeing with him and said, well, give me an example. The judge was just going to leave it at that, right? And she goes, I don't agree with you. Give me examples. So he pulled out his notes. He had made notes. He wasn't going to go to it, but he'd made notes of all the things and all the mistakes and flamboyant language and everything else. And he goes, okay. And he walked through 12 points from her pleadings that were completely inappropriate. And some of it should have been struck. So the lawyer just dug herself a deeper hole. So if you're getting cues from the judge or the bench indicating there's a problem with civility or decorum, you need to be really mindful of that. And if you continue down that road, it's going to go badly. But that kind of ties into mentors, right? If you have some role models and maybe some senior counsel that you respect and think is doing a good job, what should we think about in terms of mentors, how they can help newer people to the profession, Courtney?
Well, again, like I said before, I always think two heads are better than one. You can bounce ideas off of this individual, providing they're more senior, and generally mentors should be. They've seen it. They've been there. They've done that. They've got the t-shirt. They can tell you, hey, I don't necessarily think this is appropriate. Maybe you can, word it this way, or point you in a direction that you didn't think to go in. I mean, oftentimes we get tunnel vision just by virtue of being so immersed in the file. And I think having mentors to kind of bounce ideas off of is always a good way to kind of expand relief and maybe turn your mind to things that you hadn't otherwise thought of.
Yeah. Michelle, mentorship?
Absolutely. It's something we do a lot within the firm, but it doesn't just have to be within your place of employment. You can find mentors on at the court. You can go and chat up some senior counsel. Most of them are really nice and willing to listen and to lend an ear. And if you offer to buy someone a coffee, you've usually got their ear for a half hour.
Steph?
Coffee is the way to many hearts. I can confirm. But I absolutely agree. I think regardless of if you're in, a medium or larger firm, you feel free to branch outward. There's so many networking events. There's so many practice groups, study groups, Facebook groups. I think utilizing all of those different networks to find somebody that you respect, trust, and is willing to share their time and experience is always something that you should try to navigate towards.
Yeah, the Ontario Family Lawyers Facebook group, lots of great feedback there. I think there are over 1,000 members now. Mentorship's a great tradition in our profession. And you can call anybody here, you can call people in your community and ask, for advice or tips, or like Michelle and Steph are saying, maybe a coffee or a dinner. They may have groups that you can join, local associations, county associations, even collaborative practice groups. Law Society has a mentorship program that you can sign up for, where the practice advisory will hook you up with a mentor in your particular area of law. So really, really valuable resource, and it doesn't cost you anything. We've all been mentored. We'll pay back to the next generation when they're looking for help, because that's just one of the great things about our profession. So next poll, let's see what our audience is thinking. Have you ever been worried about having children and the impact on your career? Yes, 29%. No, 31%, and a mix throughout. I'm thinking of having children, so I'm considering it now, 16%. It's a big question, right? You just got your career started and you got a nice client base, and now you're going to take, up to 18 months off or maybe more. So Michelle, what do you think of this? I know I think you're a certified expert in this area, right?
I've got the badge to prove it. Yeah. So I've had
Or the kids in the backyard to prove it.
yeah, I've got lots of children to prove it. Yeah, so I've had 4 children. And so I took 3 months off for the first, a year off for the second, a year off for the third, and 3 months off for the last one. So I've really just done the gamut of, how often, how long. I was very young. I was maybe my second year of being a lawyer when I had my first child. And there were lots of things to navigate. So the first question I get asked a lot is, when is the best time to have children? And my frank and honest answer is, there is no good time. I've been doing this for 14 years. I can't tell you of a time where I've had a slow period, or a time where, it would have been a good time to have children. I think you just have to do it when it's right for you and your family. And if you're in the right team, in the right environment, they're going to support you, and they're going to, be ready and able to cover for when you're gone, and they're going to welcome you back with open arms. I know when I was younger, I would stress all the time when I was pregnant and going to have to tell my senior lawyers, and what would the firm say? And funny enough, I was speaking to a junior lawyer recently who was telling their firm that they were pregnant, and they were just really concerned about it, because there's just been so much negative feedback, just really lots and lots of bad examples of people behaving badly. And I want to change that. I think our firm does a really good job of this, of, encouraging people to have children, taking time off. And really, if you look back in your life and you didn't have a child because of a firm, I don't know that I would have been happy with that choice if I had, chosen not to have my kids. So the next question I get asked a lot is, when shall I tell my employer? That's a fun one. So I really think it's a bit of a personal choice. Personally, I like telling my employers early. I like to give them lots of heads up, and, to come up with a plan and to work alongside them with how that leave is going to go, how long that leave is going to go, what the plan was for that leave. But it really just depends on your relationship with your employer. It also depends on a lot of other things: cultural expectations, your experiences, your health, the health of your child. There's just a lot of factors. It's a really personal decision. Russ, have you had any interesting experiences with people telling you that they're pregnant? You can't use mine.
Well, I knew that one of our lawyers was pregnant before she told me, because it's the first time in 3 years she wasn't wearing high heels. And the next day she came in and said, oh yeah, by the way, I'm pregnant. But, what we find is a lot of, especially if you've lost a baby, women that I work with are really anxious about they'll tell me, but they're anxious about telling the team, because they may lose another child. So they want to wait till they're further along before they celebrate with the team. So I find that's quite common. And kids are great, right? I find with women who come back from mat leave, I think they're much better lawyers. They're much hungrier to get their career back to where it was before they started. And I think it's a great thing. Steph, I know you haven't had any children yet, but has this thought come across your mind?
Yeah, yes and no. I think being in my later 20s, it's still a thought, but we'll see.
Yeah. And I guess, Courtney, law clerks experience the same issues lawyers are facing, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's always that concern. Like if I leave and I come back 18 months later, how much has changed? Because we all know how much the family law rules love to change rapidly and, court processes and that sort of thing. So there's always that apprehension among clerks. Like, am I still going to be relevant when I come back? The answer is always yes.
Yeah. One of our clerks left at the beginning of the pandemic, came back. We had case lines, Zoom divorces. Everything was completely upside down, but the fundamentals are the same, right?
You can always be taught the technology and the new things, and it does not take that long. It really doesn't.
Yeah. So we did have a question coming in whether this program today qualifies for CPD credits. We've applied to the Law Society and we'll send you an email as soon as we get confirmation if it's qualified. Shannon did put into the chat Steph's decision on Canley. So if you want to find out what a fierce and amazing advocate she is, you can read that decision. But in the meantime, let's go back to our audience. We're getting some great questions and feedback. Thank you, everybody. Keep it coming in. Have you ever received a complaint? Yes, a client. Yes, colleague. Yes, opposing counsel. Or no, never. Who would ever complain against me, right? So let's give the audience a few minutes to answer this question and see what we have. There's an audience question that came in. Michelle, I don't know if you want to take it or not.
Shoot.
I'll give you a second and read it.
Oh, sorry. 1 second. It's in the chat.
And while we're waiting for that, let's see what our poll results are. Yes, 26% client. Yes, 5% colleague. Opposing party. Yeah, that actually seems to be quite common, 12%. No, never. Well, fantastic for the nevers. Let's talk about complaints. When I first got my first, client and colleagues, Steph's going to talk about Law Society in a moment, but basically if you're doing family litigation, you're holding the tail of a tiger, and the tiger is your client. Once in a while, they're going to turn around and bite you in the hand. So you're going to get client complaints. It's normal, okay? You're not getting 1 or 2 complaints a year. You're not busy enough, in my view. And the first complaint I got, I thought, oh my God, what's happening? My career is going to be over. This person's complaining. I was new. I was a few years out. I called my articling principal. I said, Frank, I got this complaint. And he just laughed. He goes, yeah, I'm surprised it took that long, right? It's like,
Oh dear.
There's always going to be complaints. There's nothing you can do about it. And, you want to be mindful of your client's complaint. You want to be providing good service and communication. You certainly want to paper your file, confirm your instructions in writing. So you can go back to those emails or those letters to say, this is what you instructed me to do. This was my advice, and this was the outcome, and explain it to the client. Often clients will get upset with the outcome you can't control. It could be their spouse not complying with the order. It could be a judge disagreeing with their evidence and order something that they don't like. Could be their own conduct. They could be having their own issues and the children are apprehended by CES or removed from their care. And they often lash out against their lawyers. Some of them lash out against everybody, including, as you can see from the poll, opposing counsel. So you want to, my tips and advice would be responsive, try to avoid solicitor assessments if you can. Most assessment officers will give the account a bit of a haircut, but really you're just flushing your time down the toilet. If you got to spend an afternoon defending your account, it might be a better strategy just to work with the client to come up with some type of compromise or fee reduction to avoid any further litigation. If you have a raving fan, they're going to tell one or two clients. If you have a client who's upset and is disappointed with your service, they're going to tell everybody they know all the time. So you want to maintain your reputation. So client complaints, colleague complaints are a little bit different. There's a lawyer in our firm. Her first year out, she wasn't practicing with us. The senior lawyer filed a complaint against her with the Law Society. And he did it strategically. She knew there was no merit to it. But for the 5 or 6 months it took the Law Society to process the complaint, she's having sleepless nights. She's subject to a lot of stress and anxiety. So me personally, I've never filed a complaint against a colleague. I'll phone them up and I'll tell them exactly what's wrong and what rule they're breaching and what I think they should be doing to correct themselves. 9 out of 10 times, when I give them an opportunity to, when I explain that I think that there's an issue, we resolve it or the lawyer changes his or her conduct. Sometimes there's an explanation for the action that I didn't think about and it's completely reasonable. So by phoning the other lawyer up and having a conversation about what's going on, it may not be something you should be complaining about in the first place. So don't go running off to the Law Society to file a complaint without giving the other lawyer an opportunity to discuss and hear him or her out. So that's the way I would approach it. But you guys want to add anything about client complaints before we move on, Michelle?
Yeah, I think it really goes back to that conversation we were having earlier about making sure that you have those difficult conversations with your client, because a lot of the times clients feel like railroaded. They feel like they don't understand what's going on, and you're not doing your client any service by not giving them the bad news. So I like to tell my clients, look, I know this is not the news you want to hear, but this is the news you have to hear so that you can make the decisions going forward that are going to be good for you and your family. And I'll lay it out for them. And if it's a really tough or complicated issue, I'll often provide some case law or some, a chapter of a book that I think, or an article that I think explains it to them in a follow-up email. Because as we all know, when people are in a state of stress, they're not hearing everything clearly. So it sometimes takes them reading these emails once, twice, 3 times, letting their tempers cool to really get an understanding of what I'm trying to do and how I'm trying to protect them.
And be careful with buyer's remorse, right? So if you're in mediation or a collaborative setting or in court, you want to give the client enough time to process the information before they make the deal. That's oftentimes when you'll see a complaint. We set up a case at 8 p.m. at night. They've been going 10 hours. The next morning, they don't like the outcome. And you're the first one they're going to blame. And in terms of processing information, that's a great point, Michelle. I've had clients where we've been in a case conference, and I thought it went great. We stepped 2 feet outside the courtroom doors, and the client says, "What happened in there?" They're overwhelmed. They can't understand. So it's a very, you'll be very cautious when a client's selling their case in that state of mind, because they're not be fully understanding the implications. And so if I have a client and I disagree with them about a particular issue, and they send me to a contested motion or trial where I know the outcome may be going badly, in addition to my reporting letter, I'll have them sign a direction saying, this is what I've told you, I think the outcome's going to be. And despite my advice, you're instructing me to make this argument, which is fine. I'll advocate for you. And the direction's only for my file. But I want the client to be crystal clear that if I'm correct, and now they're upset with me, I said, I gave you a direction, you had time to think about it, you told me to proceed. So that's another way to safeguard yourself. Client complaints, Courtney, from a law clerk's perspective, you're right on the front end of this, right?
Oftentimes, yes. Unfortunately, the closest contact is usually the punching bag, so that ends up being me a lot of the time. I think it goes a lot back to decorum. You know, if you're kind and you take the time to really understand a client and listen to what they're saying, you can often diffuse the situation with a very simple explanation. You know, I'm a firm believer in take a breath, reread the email, don't respond instantly. This digital world has created a situation where we all respond instantly and everyone expects it. And sometimes that is the worst idea in the world.
Yeah, I'll ask the clerk what went wrong here right? Before I respond. And, you know, if we've made a mistake, we'll own up to it, right? Sometimes we're less than perfect. There could be a double entry on the account, right? We put our dockets in twice. So it could be you know, sometimes the client's correct and we need to do better. We need to provide an adjustment. But Steph, client complaints, nobody ever complains against you, right?
I'm just so sweet. How could you complain? No,
And
but
humble.
and completely humble. But no, I second what Courtney said. I think there's always progress made in an open, kind conversation. It could just be a disconnect in communications. Their expectations, we empathize that clients are going through probably the most difficult time of their lives. They don't anticipate going through a separation or a divorce or, a battle with parenting time and decision-making responsibilities. It's very, very high stakes and high emotion. So if, I'm in a all-day motion or a trial and I'm not getting back to a client for 2 days and they panic and they get upset and complain, it could just be a conversation. Like, I got your email. I understand. I'll get back to you as soon as I can, or, within the next X number of days. I'm just in court. And that sometimes is all it takes. They don't understand. They, in a polite and respectful manner, you're not necessarily our only client, right? We're helping a lot of different people going through at different stages of the litigation process or the negotiations process. So just explaining, where you're coming from and how to move forward, I think is always helpful.
Clients don't think that way. They think they're their only client and you need to respond instantly. Right now, like, they almost expect the same day response. Pre-pandemic could be a week or two. We'll send you a letter. If you don't get back to them within 24 hours, some of these clients are upset, right? That's how quickly things turn around. But that's a great segue, Steph, to Law Society and LawPro. We're taking it up a notch. Now, your liability's on the line. You might lose your license. What do we need to know?
Yeah, I think one of the fears, especially as a newer call, is I don't want to ever have to talk to LawPro. I don't, it's, you need to have it, you need to have insurance, but it was one of the associates in our firm said it's better to contact LawPro. You have them for a reason. They're there for you, even if you think it might eventually escalate into a complaint, but it's not at that stage yet. Give them an email. They have a form that you could submit that you sort of map out what's happened thus far, what your concerns are, what a possible complaint may be. And they're extremely, extremely fast and very, very supportive. So take advantage and utilize their assistance. It's definitely better to get ahead of it and assistance through it rather than them having to come in and sort of play catch up. With respect
can I just add to that?
Yeah.
Every time I go to the Family Law Summit, I always think about how many files I screwed up the year before, right? It's like it's scary, right? You think, oh yeah, I got that one wrong. But I think there's a duty to report as soon as you know that there's an error or a potential error. You file the form with LawPro because they can mitigate your damages. You need to report it right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on the topic of the Law Society, you know, and you mentioned the summit, Russ, like take advantage of
Yeah.
CPDs. Yes, they're a requirement. We have to hit so many hours, but really take them seriously. Register for topics that relate to your practice or that interest you. The programs are incredible. The resources are incredible. Even just in my last year and a bit of call, I can't even count how many times I've looked back and referred to CPD materials for case law, helpful tips, you know, preparing factums, preparing for trial. All of those types of resources are there for a reason. So lean on them, rely on them, share them, you know. So those would be my sort of tips.
Yeah. For the Law Society, we're getting lots of great questions. We're going to try to get into it a little bit deeper. There's a question about buyer's remorse, and you know, you don't want to lose the settlement that's on the table at mediation. Any reasonable counsel will give your client a day or two to consider their options. I would not enter into an agreement just because I want to capture lightning in a bottle and get the deal done. You know, that's a potential recipe for disaster. So that would be my take on that.
And if counsel is insisting on a signed document that day, that's a red flag, right?
Yeah.
That's when
Yeah.
you may want to take a step back and say, wait a second, we're missing something.
Yeah.
I've actually had to highlight that once, you know, imposing a deadline of less than 24 hours on this agreement with no disclosure, and, you know, look back to the family law rules and the Family Law Act and, you know, all of this legislation and these concerns about overturning a domestic contract. You want to be mindful of duress, coercion. So, yeah, that's definitely a red flag. I agree, Michelle.
And this, with respect to Law Society complaints, they're going to happen. Your career's not going to end. Hopefully, the worst thing you could do is not respond. Right? Then they're going to say you're ungovernable. Respond within the deadline that the Law Society has given you. If you're running late, or if you're on holiday, or you have a family emergency, contact the Law Society, write to them, tell them you need an extension. I work closely with the law clerks if I get a complaint, because they got access to their notes and memos and emails and communications. So together, you usually can put a pretty wholesome record together for the Law Society to understand our response. Most responses are dealt with summarily. After you respond, the file's closed. Sometimes there'll be a more serious complaint and an investigation would be opened. My advice, if you find yourself in that situation, is hire a lawyer to help you through the process. There's senior lawyers who do this kind of work regularly. William Trudell's one, there's several others that do this kind of work. They know the workings of the Law Society tribunal, but most importantly, you want to cooperate with the Law Society and be viewed as governable, but you want somebody in your corner to advocate for you. So they may be requesting information that's not relevant or helpful, and they would be in a position to say, we're not producing this information for the following reasons. And so it's not like you're not cooperating, you're just identifying what your situation is. So that's another option that's open to you. But all this kind of feels like a black hole, right, Michelle? Like, it feels like we're spending as much time protecting, defending ourselves, concerned about client complaints, and it kind of, you feel like you're getting drawn and sucked into this black hole that takes all your energy. What do new calls need to be mindful about this, or junior lawyers?
Yeah, and even senior lawyers, burnout is real. You know, we really try to be mindful of it at the firm, and we look at people's hours. And if people are doing too many hours, we'll actually have a conversation with them. So my number one tip is take the vacation. You need it. Everyone needs it. the client needs you to take these vacations as well, because if you do, you come back refreshed, you come back, you sometimes have perspective. I recently went away to Thailand, and it was so funny. I don't know, I was out somewhere, or I was on a boat cruise, and I just had an aha moment on one of my files, and I gave myself a quick little note for when I came back to talk to this client about this. And I wasn't thinking about the file, I wasn't thinking about work, but it just gave me the time and space that my brain needed to really think about this concept. And I think it's going to work. I think it's going to create the resolution that this trial needed. The second thing too, so I actually have a friend who's never been on a vacation in 8 years, and we've had this discussion with them, but we can see it. We can see the impact on their family, on their health, and I'm sure on their practice as well. So take the vacation. Even if you don't go anywhere, stay at home, take a break. Second tip, and we take this policy very definitively at our firm, it's the right to disconnect. We strongly believe that everyone needs time to disconnect, and everyone needs time to be able to spend time with their families and, you know, have a chance to think about something other than work. So having a right to disconnect policy, and even imposing one on yourself if you're a lawyer, is a really good plan. For me, I stop looking at my emails after 7:30 p.m. and I look at them again at 5 a.m. when I wake up. So it's not a long period of time, but knowing I have that time to really concentrate on my friends, my family, my work, my friends, my family, and not my work, really is good. And I think it's good for your mental health. Try collaborative practice. I think it's really great having a portion of your file load that's not so high conflict. You know, collaborative practice, negotiation, whatever kind of concept you take or you like, it's really great to have some files that are just done quickly, that are happy, that both people tend to walk away happier, that go faster. And, you know, I still have clients who email me year after year with Christmas cards and saying, hey, you know, thanks so much. We're so happy. I'm still friendly with my ex, and we can still, you know, be at events. And I really thank you for that process. And I
Yeah,
think my last,
24-hour rule is always good before reacting to
oh
things
yes,
that are upsetting.
48 hours if you need it, right?
Yeah.
If you really haven't calmed down, give yourself that 48 hours.
Every time I write one of those letters and look at it later, I think, oh, I'm glad I did not send that out.
Yeah.
Have some hobbies and interests outside of the practice of law, right? This could take over your life. Meditate, yoga, exercise, get involved in community activities. So these are all helpful things. Steph, you want to add anything to the black hole of practicing law?
I sometimes there's comfort in discomfort. You know, if colleagues or other lawyers are also feeling that burnout, or also feeling that weight, just knowing you're not alone in that and you're not the only one struggling with that, I find can be very therapeutic in a way, you know, like trauma bonding in a sense. So I think not internalizing it and not being afraid to talk about the struggles that you're facing, or, you know, the stress that you're trying to overcome, the file that just you cannot, you know, you just dread dealing with because it's so high conflict or so emotionally draining. Having those people around you, you know, your law clerks, your colleagues, other professionals, mentors, to lean on and to sort of brainstorm with, I think is how I cope with that kind of pressure and that burnout feeling.
And law clerks aren't immune to this. Courtney, what are some tips that you have?
Oh gosh, I think disconnecting is important. I mean, 98% of the time, if it's after 5 o'clock, the problem's still going to be there tomorrow. Stressing about it after 5 is not going to help anybody. And, you know, the 24-hour rule, I think, is incredibly important. Don't respond in haste, especially if it's upsetting or if it will be upsetting to your client. Take a breath. It's always helpful. And, you know, I used to have email on my phone. I don't do that anymore because I couldn't help myself. So, you know, now it's only on the laptop and I only deal with it during business hours. It's incredibly important.
I like that tip. I might take that one from you. So Spider-Man said, with great power comes great responsibility. Giving back, Michelle, what are your tips here?
I love that saying. I use it on my children all the time. So number one, I think Courtney did a great job talking about mentorship and finding mentors. I think it's your number one resource is having a mentor to help you. And, there are formal mentorships, but there are also informal mentorships where you, pick one another's brain or have those conversations and have someone who may be the same year of call or similar year of call than you, but may have encountered this before. And as I said, talking things out really, I think, is a great thing, even if it's with your law clerk. Sometimes they have great insight into your file or into your client that you may not have. I also do think that
And mentorship can help grow your network and develop your business, right? They're going to start referring work to you once they get to know you.
Oh, absolutely. I have a real estate lawyer friend who he and I will ask questions to one another all the time, and we refer work all the time to one another. And it's great because I know that he knows what he needs to do from the family law perspective. And he knows that I'm going to draft documents properly. And I'll even send them to him in advance of my client signing it to make sure that he's okay with the language and that it's enforceable and that it's correct. Right. So having those mutually beneficial friendships is really important. Another great thing is social media. I think there's so many great resources out there. So Russ, you spoke about the Facebook groups. Instagram has information. TikTok has information. Just make sure it's Canadian. Shmuel Stern, if you don't know that name, Google it. He has some wonderful resources. He's got some stuff that I refer back to sometimes just to make sure that I'm fact checking myself.
He's coming onto our program to talk about financial disclosure.
Oh
So
my gosh.
stay tuned. Yeah.
That's exciting. I may join you. I may invite myself to that meeting.
Of course.
I'm a little bit of a fangirl. So, these webinars are great. Another great example, it's all free. It's a great idea just to have information. 311 Jarvis also has some phenomenal information, and their speakers are usually judges. And so you're getting information right from the bench. And all of this is free. I know for young calls, the funds and the fees are a huge weight. I get it, but there's so many free resources. You can do all of your CPDs and more completely free. And we actually have our virtual summit that's coming up. That's going to give you September 18th and September 19th. It's going to give you most of your CPD hours for the year. So stay tuned for that as well.
I find the more you give, the more you receive. Tips and tricks. This is sort of bring us this train into the station. Then we're going to do some Q&A. So we're going to bring our Top Gun Courtney in to let us know, what are we supposed to be doing? Where are some hacks to get around this?
Well, I'll keep it short, but law clerks are your friend. As a new lawyer or a lawyer to be, make us your friend. We've got tons of experience, and we're on the front lines dealing with court staff and clients and process servers and that sort of thing. And as lawyers, you may not necessarily have the exposure to those folks, where we definitely do. And this kind of ties in nicely to the rules of the rules, but also not the rules. Each court has their own process. So, the family law rules apply, but they're oftentimes modified by different courts. So Newmarket is very different than Oshawa, and Brampton is, very different than anywhere else. So law clerks generally tend to know these things. And honestly, there's no such thing as a dumb question. Do not be afraid to ask questions. That's how everybody learns. Mentorship in early practice, ask the questions. This is the time to do it. And in terms of organization for your practice, I think it's key. If you don't have charts for everything, you're probably missing something. The clerks at the firm, we've come up with charts for pretty well everything. Trial prep lists, financial statement requirement lists, you name it, I got a chart for it. And it helps keep everybody organized. The lawyers can quickly look at it. We know what's outstanding. The clients know what's outstanding. Precedents are also great. They make things easier. You can kind of pick and choose what clauses you want without having to recreate the wheel. I think that's huge, especially if you're a young lawyer and you've got a huge caseload. Precedents are great. We've also got a chart for that. So that's kind of my basic tips and tricks.
Just to pick your brain a little bit here, Courtney, if you're a law clerk working with a lawyer, what are some tips that you would recommend for that clerk?
Oh, there's a saying that getting lawyers in line is like herding cats, and quite frankly, it is. I love you guys, but you all have very different personalities, and I think it's pretty key to learn what works and what doesn't. Be open in your communication. If you're not sure what the lawyer wants, ask them. That's the best way to find out. Don't guess, do it wrong, and then have to redo it. There's nothing more frustrating than a lawyer going back to you going, this is not what I wanted at all. And I think if you need it in writing, do it in writing. If you need a phone call, pick up the phone. Everybody kind of has to learn to work together because you're all in the same boat and you're trying to survive.
Yeah, and the flip side of that, for lawyers who work with law clerks, what would you tell the lawyers?
Oh, what wouldn't I tell them? Ask us. We might know some things that you don't. We deal with the court staff. I can pick up the phone to some of the people in Toronto and ask them questions where lawyers might not be comfortable to do that. And, sometimes it's good to have us in your back pocket. If you're not sure about filing timelines, please ask us. You don't want to do it wrong and then have us tell you bad news. Nobody likes that.
Yeah, I guess the tip I would have, I had a clerk who I used to work with who's no longer with the firm. She came into my office and said, I screwed this document up. I made a mistake. I go, no worries. How we're going to fix it. And we just start working on an amendment and cleaning it up. And she always said to me, that was the best thing you could have ever said to me, because otherwise I'd be afraid to ever admit I did anything wrong. Lawyers are going to make mistakes, and if the clerks can pick them up, that's great, and vice versa. And if you can work as a team and collectively identify issues, I think that's most effective. Steph or Michelle, you want to get on any tips or tricks while we're wrapping this topic up?
Sure. Going back to precedent. So very early in my career, I just have a USB stick. And anytime I find a pleading, motion, anything that I like, whether it's mine or somebody else's, I'll put it on that stick. And I still have that stick today. It's on my desk right there. It's bright orange. But it's so great because you will never know when you need that information and when you'll come across this issue. And you may say, oh yeah, that's right. 5 years ago, I saw this motion material and I really liked it. I'm going to go and copy and paste some of that and just make sure that the case law is updated and use some of that. So building your own precedents is very important. And I strongly recommend everyone start doing it today.
Steph?
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, especially if it's not yours, right? You're going to learn from other lawyers, other pleadings. It could even be opposing counsels, but if they make great arguments, great points, even writing style. My writing style, gosh, I don't know how much it's changed over the past just year. Reading and understanding, and same with case law and endorsements and what judges commonly reference or highlight in their endorsement decisions. I think those are great and helpful resources.
Yeah, I agree. I think my tip would be, whether you're a law clerk or family lawyer or other lawyer, find an area of law that you're passionate about and try to work with people that you enjoy. You're going to spend, 6, 7, 8 hours through your day doing this, maybe longer. If you're enjoying it, it doesn't feel like work. Like, I get a kick out of what I do. I would never retire. I enjoy this too much. So be passionate, and then it doesn't feel like work. So thank you, everybody. I'm sure Shannon's going to come back on and we're going to do some Q&A. We're scheduled to go to 1:15, but we're running a little ahead, which is great. And look who appears magically. Shannon, welcome back.
Thank you. And thank you so much to all of our presenters. That was really insightful. Steph, are you sure you were only called to the bar a couple years ago?
Yep,
I would have guessed much
2022.
longer.
She's seen a lot though, right, Steph?
I have 6 years of shadowing, law clerking, manning the phones at the office. You see some stuff, that's for sure. You
That's
definitely get
got some more
a tougher.
stories.
I do, some battle scars.
Well,
Or
we're
is it
lucky to have you.
PTSD? I don't know.
So as Russ mentioned, we've reserved some time here at the end to go over some questions. So first, this is a little shout out to Courtney. Where can we find competent and sweet law clerks like Courtney for hire? Russ,
Take
how
her
did you
email
do
off.
it?
You can't have her.
Courtney's her stage name. It's not her real name. No, I'm just what
Okay,
we
so getting
find,
into,
what we
sorry.
find, and now Courtney can correct me when I'm done, but usually the best hires come from people the team has either worked with before or know through the community. And that's for lawyers and law clerks. But Courtney, where should somebody go to find an experienced law clerk?
Oh gosh, I used to do field placement with Seneca a lot. So a lot of their students are really great. Oftentimes, if you sign up to be a field placement employer and you indicate that you may be in the market to hire a clerk, they'll send you some of their better candidates, which I never said that. Other places would be the Institute's website. You can post ads there as well. So generally, most of us are members of the Institute. I might
When you
also
say
have some
institute,
friends.
that's Institute for Law Clerks? Is that
Yes.
the full name?
Yeah, the Institute of Law Clerks of Ontario. You can post job postings there, and generally speaking, us that are registered there will take a look at it. And if you're really desperate, you can email me. I might have some friends.
And our clerk, Darla, teaches at Durham. They have a law clerk program there, and there's clerk programs throughout the province.
Great, thank you so much. So next question, this one is for Michelle. How did Michelle make the decision on how long of a parental leave to take for the pregnancy's children? Was it with input of the firm, and was there pressure from the firm to take shorter leaves?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both, knowing my file load and what was happening. For my first one, I actually was going to take 6 months, and after 3 months, I said, "This is it. I'm done. I do not want to be stuck in this condo with this baby anymore." So my mom got the baby, and I got to go back to work, which was lovely. For my second and third, it was my choice that I wanted to take a year. There definitely was pressure from the firm. It wasn't this firm to come back early, but I knew what I wanted, and I knew that if they really valued me, that they would allow me to take that 1 year, and it's kind of the law. And then for my last one, I actually had a trial, so I chose to come back after 3 months for my last baby. So yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing, Michelle. Okay, next question. What are the challenges an internationally trained lawyer can come across, and how do they fit in a law firm?
Yeah, so I can touch on this. I actually obtained my law degree overseas. So I knew working with the firm and being a student, a summer student, and really being immersed in a legal, profession. After I graduated my undergraduate degree, I wanted to travel. So I took the time to go to England, obtained my law degree in England, and then came back here. So for internationally trained lawyers, you do have this extra component that you have to go through, which is the NCA process. So that just allows Ontario or whichever province you're returning to accredit your law degree from overseas. So it was about 5 or 6 exams that I had to do, but I was able to work at the firm and help on files and get more real world experience while I was studying for the NCA exams. Once that was done, I could jump right into the LSO licensing process. And that, again, it's something that I was able to balance work while studying. In hindsight, it was probably a little bit more stressful than if I just graduated law school, did the exams, and then articles. But I think I learned more from my experience, from shadowing other lawyers, from working closely with law clerks than, law school or books ever taught me. So in some ways, I think it actually propelled me forward. But that was just my experience. Everyone's going to be different.
That's great. Thanks so much, Stephanie. So next question from the audience. In the field of family law, how much of the everyday involves doing research?
I can take this one if anybody else doesn't want to take it. Yeah, so I say every day. I think it's something that you need to be doing constantly. The law is ever evolving. You need to keep up with it. In the beginning, you want to make sure that you are doing the research so you know the case law and you know what the answer is going to be before you go to court. And then as you get more experienced, you're getting more complex, more interesting cases, and you'll find that you'll need to do research for the more, out of the norm things that you encounter. I sign up for a daily digest that sends me interesting cases every day. We read the ORs. So I'm reading a couple of cases a day at the very minimum. What about you guys?
Yeah, I agree. The Aaron Frank's got a great newsletter. If you're practicing family law, we have a newsletter. You can follow Law Times, Law 360 will keep you up to date. You can set Google alerts for your specific area that you're practicing, and Google will tell you when new developments come up. Keep track of the decisions coming out of the Court of Appeal. They're often reported on in these newsletters, but you can also just browse the Court of Appeals website. They publish their appeal decisions weekly. Or ask a junior lawyer or a law student to write a memo on this particular topic. What do you do, Steph?
I like to get my hands dirty. I like to do the research. I think if I immerse myself in the case law, I understand it better. But I'm an over preparer, that's for sure. But I'd rather that. So
And most family lawyers have an annotated practice book with the rules and the statutes. And those books have all the relevant cases under each section. So it's usually current our book would be current to 2024. So you may want to do some updating research since then to see if anything's developed. But that's for family lawyers, that's usually the Bible. You go there first, you get a really good idea as to whether or not you need to do any more research.
Great, thank you for sharing that. I'll include some of those resources that were mentioned in a follow-up email tomorrow to all of you, as well as some other resources that were mentioned throughout the presentation for your reference. So it looks like we have time for a couple more questions here. So next question, once practicing law, and if you do not want to go to court, what other options are there? Steph, did you want to take this one?
sure, I was in your shoes. I wanted to stay clear of court at all costs, especially in the first few years of my practice. There are other options. If you are in a firm that is a family firm or another sort of barrister type area of law, you can do negotiations, contracts, collaborative practice. We're all collaboratively trained at our firm. Or if you're more interested in the sort of solicitor areas of law, like real estate, those are typically areas that don't go to court as often. There's always, in-house counsel jobs, but don't. My recommendation, my advice is don't rule out litigation. You can always start by shadowing or, assisting a more senior counsel on a litigation file. And so you're not on your own, you're learning the ropes, and then you can sort of slowly, expand and take on those types of files on your own.
That's great. Thanks so much, Steph. And last question here before we wrap up. What do you do if you start on your own after you're called to the bar?
Well,
Michelle, do you have any?
You've got lots of tips from today's program. You use mentors. Law Society has a practice advisory, which is a great resource. I used my bar ad material for 2-3 years. It was fantastic, right? Just about every question you have, the bar ad material covered it off initially, so you can respond intelligently to whatever the question is. But to get some practical experience, you can go to courts and sit in and watch the court hearings and watch senior counsel, how they advocate, and take the best of the best and look out for the worst ones and develop relationships. Join a county law library and spend some time in the lounge there. That's a great way to meet people and to develop your practice. Like I said earlier, be passionate, focus on an area of law that you enjoy. If you're not busy, you can volunteer. So if you want to do some charity work at a local organization and that's connected to that area of law, volunteer your time and you start developing your network. And that's a great way to make a start.
Great advice. Thank you so much. So it looks like that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much again to all of our panelists for sharing your insights. We also want to send a big thank you to all of our audience members for your participation, sending in your great questions. It is much appreciated. So yeah, I just want to thank everyone and encourage you also to share your feedback, all of your thoughts on today's presentation. And that's all we have time for today. So thank you so much again, everyone.